Hey everybody, before we get to the meat of today's show, I'm going to serve up a little appetizer for you here and tell you about another libertarian podcast, another great podcast out there, hosted by our friends over at Good Morning Liberty, also known as Nate and Charlie. And of course, there's been some talk and some rumors and some things swirling about name mispronunciations, and they might have called me Jack. I might have called Nate Nick. None of that matters. None of that matters at all. What matters is the awesome show they deliver multiple days a week. It's a 5-day per week podcast. They have an awesome segment coming up at the end of the week called the Dumb Bleep of the Week, and it is hilarious. It's a can't miss. It's one of those segments that, you know, even if you're not listening to every episode, you got to tune back in. You don't miss the dumb bleep. So check out Good Morning Liberty. Go subscribe to their podcast, Good Morning Liberty. Check it out today with Nate and Charlie.
We are born free, and we will die free. The time in between, though, that's complicated. In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Oderman.
Welcome back for another episode of Finding Freedom right here on the Lions of Liberty podcast. And ladies and gentlemen, got a great show for you guys today. I'm excited for you guys to hear it. Going to be talking to two members of the Sound Mind Creative Group. They're putting together an awesome documentary that's going to be shining a light on this COVID pandemic. They're doing it at risk to their careers and their reputations. So at this point in time, they're anonymous. They're using pseudonyms, and we'll talk about that in the show. Before we get to that, before I introduce them, I do want to remind you guys that this show, Lions of Liberty, this podcast, it's a variety program. It's the oldest libertarian variety program and the best libertarian variety program. You can kick off the week on Mondays with Mark Claire with the flagship program. Mark's hosting debates. He's talking to libertarian leaders. He's talking entrepreneurs. He's talking all sorts of different people. Every Wednesday, it's more of a current events show, Electric Liberty Land, hosted by Brian McWilliams. Brian has been doing some more interviews. He had a great one yesterday. Awesome interview with Olivia Rondeau. Definitely do not want to miss that. Check it out. And then, of course, today's show, what you're listening to right now. So please go subscribe. Pound that subscribe button, as they say. We appreciate you guys. We appreciate y'all, as they say in the South. So let's get rolling into today's show. All right, today I am joined by two individuals from the Sound Mind Creative Group. They're working on a docuseries, I believe it now is. Originally a documentary, but now a docuseries. And it's going to talk about really the tensions between the mainstream narrative, this COVID narrative that we're all dealing with, and those challenging it, and telling the stories, those affected by it, damaged by it, and all those different things. And we'll dig into the details of their vision and what they're trying to accomplish with it. I will say they are using pseudonyms, so I will introduce them. But these are not the real names. They're protecting their identity. So I'm joined by John and Alan. Welcome to Finding Freedom, guys.
Thanks for having us, John.
Yeah.
Well, great to have you guys here. I know you've been making the old podcast rounds and been having great success getting support and funding for this docuseries. I'm very excited about it from what I've heard. So excited to ask you guys some questions today. And I guess before we get started talking about it, let's kind of start at the top. I have the two of you here. Whoever wants to take this first can take it. What motivated you to go down this path? It's something, obviously you're using pseudonyms, so you have something to lose doing this, creating this docuseries. Why now, and what nudged you to do this?
Well, it all started with Tom Woods, actually. He was he'd been doing a number of podcasts about COVID, and he did one with a gentleman who has a Twitter account where he publishes charts, and basically pairwise comparison charts that show how different areas that took different approaches to the crisis had very similar results. So, for example, North Dakota and South Dakota. North Dakota locked down, South Dakota didn't. South Dakota's results were actually better than North Dakota's. So in one of those podcasts, Tom said, I wish somebody would make a documentary about this, a high-quality documentary that really shows this clearly and that brings out the human interest stories of people whose lives have been impacted by all of these political decisions. And I said to myself, gosh, I'd really like to see that documentary. I hope somebody does it. And I was shaving at the moment and looked in the mirror and kind of had an epiphany and said, well, why shouldn't I do it? And I didn't think I was that serious about it, but I got on the phone with my partners and put it forward, and we bandied it back and forth for a couple of weeks trying to decide how serious we were about it. And ultimately we decided it was a story that needed to be told, and that we had the skills and resources to get it done.
So when you say partners, is that everyone who's in this Sound Mind Creative Group? Was it existing prior to this, or was it formed for the purpose of making this docuseries?
Yeah, well, I'll jump in there. We talked about it a lot. We were wondering about, okay, what's a way that we could do this? This started, 4 or 5 months ago, and this is before the Fauci emails dropped. This is when any sort of dissent was really being dumped on, and it was like, oh God, like to say anything right now is really difficult. And we were discussing our various sort of positions, and the general public sort of purview was to kind of go along with what the mainstream media was saying. And I mean, usually when you make a major project, you form a single purpose entity, and we're like, well, why don't we form a single purpose entity / facade for us to all operate with, and we would be an experiment of anonymity. I mean, we feel that privacy is an important thing, so we created the Sound Mind Creative Group for the exclusive purpose of making Follow the Science on lockdowns of liberty, and we thought we'd just come up with sort of an ethos by which to work. I mean, freedom of expression and the uninhibited exchange of ideas, belief in objective reality, as well as the essential subjective imagination of the artists. We were just kind of like all the things that we wanted to talk about. And it's been actually quite good. It's created a area where we felt initially comfortable wading into this space. I mean, it's why necessarily give the cancel culture, which is a phenomenon we have to deal with right now, an easy marks, as it were. I mean, the emphasis is to create your own brand, put yourself out there. I mean, you've developed your podcast world, which is wonderful, and we're all fans. And yet, it's sort of like when you work in LA, we've been so used to the groupthink our entire careers. We understood cancel culture is really just the groupthink of Hollywood writ large, and we were like, well, we need to create something that gives us an ability to pursue this, see if it has legs, see what we're doing, see what kind of people we can bring in, see that we emphasize privacy and self-expression. And it's been quite phenomenal, the response. I mean, we're rapidly approaching the 100,000 mark on our fundraiser campaign. And it's been good. It's been a good experience for us. And we have a lot of creatives who are joining us. The Sound Mind Creative Group keeps growing, and we have a nice array of talent. And some of us will probably eventually kind of come forward as to who we are and what exactly we're doing. But we feel at this point it's been very effective and benefiting us.
Well, yeah, that was kind of my next question. Is there a point in time, when this docuseries is rolled out, is it feasible, or maybe have you in the past created an anonymous or been a contributor anonymously to a project like this throughout the whole process?
Yeah, I mean, there's projects that I've consulted on, and I have there's projects I've consulted on and other organizations I've worked with where it was designed that there's people who wanted to work on it but not necessarily get credited. They were perfectly comfortable taking their day rates, taking their negotiated fee for it, but they're like, yeah, why don't you leave me off this one? It's a little too free thinking for their the Hollywood elite, shall we say. And the name of the game is, I mean, I always like to say all the cliches are true when it comes to Hollywood. I mean, just you can kind of think of it. I mean, some of the easy ones are, you never hear no. I liked it, I didn't love it is the most condemning thing you would ever hear. There's this nuance to everything, and there's all this sort of non-talk. I mean, this sort of double talk that doesn't really. It's all about who you know. It's all about how you play the game, how you. I mean, it kind of got blown open by the Weinstein stuff in terms of the Me Too movement, and like my God, would you believe it? Actors and actresses have been sleeping their way to roles. I mean, who knew? But I mean,
shocking.
But that's just the sort of tip of the iceberg. I mean, the amount of sort of I would say abuse of creative talent is the name of the game. And by definition, a lot of creatives are usually fairly self-conscious about their work, and there's always that moment of like, oh, everything I do is terrible, and the producers will jump on it like, great, why don't you sign over all the rights to me? And then they go off and make a lot of money with it, and the creators are left high and dry. And so we've had all of us have been very good about kind of making sure we not fall victim to the contract slave nature of Hollywood, where you give things away too readily. We try and support artists. We try and treat everyone as artists, and then we try and work together and work intelligently as people who care about freedom to have good contracts, smart contracts, and do it in such a way that doesn't necessarily cost us our livelihood and other avenues of our careers.
That makes sense. And I give you both tremendous credit for being able to stick it out in Hollywood and operate in that world, being free thinkers. That has to be. I'm sure there's probably a lot of people in that situation where you just find yourself sort of biting your tongue and hearing things and sort of screaming on the inside, wanting to speak out, but really not being able to. So hopefully, and maybe this vehicle that you've created, the SoundMind Creative Group, will be a vehicle that can help to break down some of those barriers. I don't know if that's something that you envision, but
well, it's something we're already experiencing. I mean, we certainly have been contacted by a number of high-level people in various capacities who have said, we really want to support you in this project, but we can't have our names associated with it. So it definitely, that was a piece of why we wanted to create it, not only to protect ourselves, but also to be able to attract talent to the project that might want to contribute, but not be willing to be forward with it. And so that's definitely happening. And I think we envision this having legs into the future as a vehicle for creating material that otherwise might not get created. My intuition is there are probably many projects that don't get past a certain stage because people are concerned that if they go forward with it, their careers could be upended.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So let's focus in on the docuseries itself, and maybe you can share with us. I know I talked about it at the top of the intro, sort of the high-level view, focusing on people who've been damaged and affected by the lockdowns. But do you have a vision, or have you started to plan out sort of how you're going to tell those stories, or what sort of stories you'd like to tell?
Yeah, well, it's straight out the bat, we can say that we've expanded the project. Originally, we were thinking a documentary. And then we've moved towards a docuseries, a 5-part docuseries, 60 minutes, so 5 hours. And we realized that there's so much ground to cover, and it's an ongoing story. I mean, as we talked about, once we started this thing, we were a couple of months into it. We already raised several tens of thousands of dollars, and then the Fauci emails dropped, and we were just delighted to be on. It's one of those things where like, oh, well, we're on the pulse. So that was a reassuring moment. But what we want to do first is it's sort of have the episodes go through this process of first recounting what the experience was, what the narrative as presented real time, because there was so much that happened so quickly. It's almost you forget, where I mean, there were like, it started off with toilet paper shortages, and then mask shortages, and then respirator shortages, and it was almost like the weekly, like sci-fi. Here's the problem of the week that we were dealing with in the narrative. So we want to retrace what was the experience we had as a culture, and what was reported, but then simultaneously track the actual data. What was the data that came out? What was it showing? How it was reported versus what we can see in hindsight, what the data actually had. And we have a feeling, our initial instinct for all this was that, I bet the data doesn't really reflect what the narrative was presented and the policymakers were telling us. That's our strongest instinct. I mean, we're going into this as neutrally as possible, but we have our suspicions as to what's going to be revealed. And a lot of it's already pretty obvious, as John just mentioned about, I mean, just looking at North Dakota versus South Dakota and those who had lockdown measures versus the results. We then want to look at what were the techniques of manipulation of the narrative and manipulation of the data, and see how that affected what was presented to us, and really kind of reconstruct. Well, now at this point, the whole origin of the virus, how it the relationship. I mean, at this point, it's become, what's the relationship between Fauci and the Wuhan lab and all the actors and agents in between, and where the money was going. I mean, the follow the science and follow the money is kind of a synonymous thing at this point, because it just smacks of a corrupt system or a highly damaged system that may in fact not been revealing the types of information that policymakers should have been making major decisions to, in fact, shut us all down, rather than protecting the vulnerable, because the vulnerable were in fact, there's people with comorbidities and the elderly really faced quite possibly a death sentence. But instead, we locked up all of the people who weren't vulnerable and hand tied everyone from becoming what's the word I'm looking for? The human ingenuity to try and work around this, rather than having these top-down measures telling us all what to do. We could have had 350 million citizens going like, okay, how are we going to work around this and do something different to help those who are vulnerable. Now, through that, obviously, we're going to need to start looking at the vaccines. That's become a very hot topic. Existing treatments that are being suppressed, looking at the big tech and that suppression. See that more as like an episode 3 type scenario. And we see, and we're going to have a number of main characters kind of going through the journey of exploring this, the human interest story, so that's the scientific side. And then we want to have the human interest side. We have to have those human stories, that discrete human experience that reflects what these policies did to our culture, to our economy, to our individual selves and our businesses. It's unbelievable what has happened. Everywhere you've ever been and everyone you've ever known also had to deal with these lockdowns. It's the first worldwide singular experience, and we are going to have to unpack this. And we want to look at the years of lost productivity. I mean, children stuck at home, not being able to learn. The trauma of not being able to interact with children their own age, moving up, stuck home with the adults, having to adults losing their jobs, losing their dreams, aspirations, businesses folding. I mean, there's so much hardship that far exceeded the supposed benefits of the lockdown. We want to explore that. So to kind of wrap up my initial sort of foray into this, we feel that this sort of dramatizing the data, sort of reconstructing what happened as we experienced, reconstructing what actually happened as the data should have kind of reveals, and then reflecting that against the human interest story. So we feel that there's a powerful triangulation there that will kind of help us learn the wisdom of what we should have learned from all this, rather than this bizarre kind of Kafkaesque experience that we all went into.
Yeah, I mean, and you're absolutely true. This is an evolving story, and you're talking about the different treatments, that have kind of been suppressed, and one that I've been really looking into recently, and it's gotten actually some mainstream, like I said, as mainstream as Joe Rogan is, some mainstream play with ivermectin and the studies around that, and how that's just completely being ignored and by the mainstream media, by mainstream science, which is just alarming, really. So I'm sure that's something.
Yeah, well, the fact that it's off patent, no one's going to make any money off of it. I mean, sort of like talk about all the cliches being true. It's very suspicious. I mean, it's sort of, if ivermectin were to be deemed a viable treatment, then the emergency approvals of these vaccines would be knocked off the table, and that seems to be not permitted by the powers that be right now. And it's fairly clear to everyone.
No, 100%. So will you focus mostly on the United States or on a worldwide scale? What made me think of that is, you're talking about everyone's been impacted by this, and talking about the students who are out of school and the parents who had their dreams taken. You look at a country like India. I interviewed a tour guide over there, and he was telling me the story of when they had their lockdowns in India. The government gave 4 hours warning. And the way, I haven't been to India, but from what I understand is you have a lot of very poor people, the laborers who are from the villages but live in the cities. And they travel back and forth from village to city using public transportation, not every day, but maybe when they need to. When everything was shut down in the cities, they were not able to get back to their villages. They had to walk. You're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people walking hundreds of miles with children on their backs, not sufficient food or water, and a lot of people died on that journey. And when you look at like third world countries, poor nations as a whole, a lot of people, this is also the case in the United States to a certain degree, a lot of school-age children will never go back to school because maybe they had to, if their parents lost their jobs, they had to start working. If they went to remote learning, they didn't have access to a computer or a cell phone. That's the case in India with a lot of the education there. So will you, or maybe to start with, maybe it's the U.S. Do you have plans maybe in later episodes to focus on impacts throughout the world?
I think the majority of our concentration will be on the U.S. In part because I think our target market is largely U.S. and our access to information and interviewees will largely be U.S. based. That said, I think what you're pointing to is critical because I think the people who will have suffered the most from this crisis will be people in the third world. And that's going to, like you mentioned, is going to have repercussions for decades to come. And one of the things that I found most infuriating during this whole process is seeing how people who are in positions where they can weather the storm comfortably assume that that's true of everybody in the world. I mean, you can look at that just in the frame of the United States, that a lot of people in my Facebook feed are in the entertainment industry or are middle class and probably can work from home. But there are a whole bunch of people who couldn't do that and whose lives have really been deeply impacted by this. And I've seen people say, isn't it so great that, in a time like this, we're able to work from home and make things work for ourselves? And yeah, that's great for you. But what about all the people who can't do that? And like you're saying, all of the third world casualties as a result of this. I saw something recently about how the amount of money coming into places like Venezuela has completely bottomed out from immigrants who've moved here and were sending money back to their family. Now those immigrants are out of work and can no longer support their families in places like Venezuela. So their economy has faltered in part because of the lack of income coming from places like the U.S. So it's a global story, and we're going to have to address that on some level in the series.
Absolutely. So let's talk about really. You talk about the target audience being the U.S. Actually influencing and persuading that target audience. Obviously, someone like myself, I mean, I'm going to watch it and just enjoy it because you already have me won over. But persuading the person who fully supported the lockdowns, who fully bought into if it saves just one life, it's worth it. Well, those lockdowns actually might have saved one life, but it traded someone else's life who wasn't able to get, maybe medical attention for cancer or heart problem or something like
Indeed.
that. How do you approach that? So because that's very, I mean, as I'm sure as you both know, that's going to be very hard to change people's minds.
Well, we do see the target audience as being the innate live and let live crowd. I mean, most people don't vote, most people aren't registered, but we feel that there's an overall sort of I like to call them sort of a traditional liberal or center or moderate or even center right moderates that just are, just kind of got caught up in this kind of thing. They've been misled. I would and millennials as well, because they've been learning everything from online. I mean, everything just comes in. They sort of absorb it from the internet and everything, and this nonstop narration. And I feel like we, to what you just said, we're going to pull a lot of the traditional right and center right with us, regardless of we feel that there's just a natural audience there, the natural skeptics there, but we feel that we're really fighting for sort of this, like the traditional liberal, which is, we could probably talk about how the transition to classical liberalism, but I think sort of the traditional liberal who has been sort of siphoned off by this parasitic left that has turned this into one giant sort of agenda driven power grab, just to kind of show a little bit how I feel about it. And I think, these are people that, the traditional liberals, they usually have an innate skepticism of authoritarianism and believe in self-expression and all these things where everything seems to have flipped. And they, this large liberal live and let live crowd has gone down this pit of believing everything that they're being told by the government. And we feel that there's a natural skepticism of authority has been compromised, and that there's been a weaponization of fear and by politicians and media. And what we want to do is we want to offer those who may already have some sort of innate sense of skepticism, because I think they can sense that there's something not correct. There's something like this doesn't quite compute. The natural cognitive dissonance of what they're told and what they're seeing isn't gelling in their mind, and they see the draconian approaches, and we want to encourage them to resist that in the future. And we also think that we can reach those who have internalized the propaganda and may begin questioning the validity of the lockdowns and what they're being sold through the mainstream narrative.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about really these. Traditional liberals, really, that you would think of, very, civil liberties oriented, anti-authority. I'm convinced that if Donald Trump had come out very aggressively and at the federal level had implemented a mask mandate and started shutting down businesses and taking over businesses, which he didn't do. I think he did what he should have done and largely step back and let the states handle it. But if he had taken that route, I think you would have seen the liberals push back, and it would have been the liberals with the the anti-mask and protesting lockdowns. So it's interesting how that flipped like that. Even when it comes to the vaccine, I think if Trump had beat Biden and was still president with the vaccine, I think we would see more resistance from liberals. So, and that I guess that really just tells you how much the media controls everything.
Yeah, and that's certainly a piece of the story that is important for us to tell, is how the media strongly influenced the choices that people made and what people were willing to take. I mean, that's one of the shocking things that I'm sure everybody in your audience gets is how quickly and willingly people gave up their basic rights to earn a living, to travel, to spend time with their loved ones. And a part of what we need to look at is how those messages were put out there into the market, that people were willing to absorb them. Sorry, completely lost my train of thought there. You want to pick that up, Alan?
Sure. Well,
there was a point there.
Well, I think if memory serves, it's sort of, this mainlining, we were already, I think, to the points you guys were both just making. Fear had clearly become a major player in our culture. The use of fear, sort of Trump derangement syndrome, the divisiveness between the politics, the whole BLM Antifa stuff. There's been this driving aspect of fear and the return of shaming and shunning. and how suddenly people were like, if I don't do this, I'm going to be on the outside of society. I mean, I'll segue slightly into an anecdote of like, all these sort of these people were like, okay, well, we have to wear masks now, and even outdoors. And I never wore a mask outdoors. I refused. I just knew that medically there was never a need for it, and anything that said that was a hyperbole. That's just the nature of these things. It was not.
If there was a need for masks outdoors, then we got some serious.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at 20% casualty. I mean, horrible, like a true plague. This was nothing of that. This was a new disease that had a bit of a Russian roulette if you had comorbidities and you were a particular age. And that, okay, we need to be careful with that. But this sort of extreme hyperbole of what was needed to happen. And I remember I'd go for hikes in the hills, and that was the one thing you could do it in the early days. And people would come the other way, and they'd have their masks on, and they would see you, and they'd see you without your mask, and they would stop, and they would turn their back, and they would like face. And so you had to like walk this gauntlet of backs as you walked by them. And this is only like 2 weeks into it. And I thought, my God, this is just incredible. This is just watching everyone change their sense of freedom and social norms and the adoption of shame and shunning, which is the precursors of a fear-based society, which is with the tool that authoritarian regimes use to control the population, and always have through most of human history. And we just happen to have this experiment of the Western world of the last several centuries that has been different to that, and they're just kind of reverting back to this mean existence of doing what they're told. And God, it's just like from day one, I thought, oh wow, we have a lot of work to do. It's shocking. It was shocking to watch 80% of the country just roll over on the civil rights as if it was nothing, because there was such a deep ingrained fear to short circuit their rational being.
It's the fear, and it's the team sports aspect of politics. So you have the people who, now that even if they're fully vaccinated and, mask mandates are lifted, they go grocery shopping and they'll still wear a mask because they don't want anyone to think that they're a Republican not wearing a mask.
Sure. Yeah.
You're proving the point that this is all just theater. But by saying that, I've had multiple liberal friends of mine say that openly. So that's, I don't know. It's tough to, you have to almost approach it in a way by saying, it's okay. I understand, what's happening here, but, give them an alternative, something that, a way out.
Well, yeah, we need to let people save face, because a big part of what we're doing is asking people to admit they're wrong. That is a big ask for most of humanity. Most people don't like to admit they're wrong. But if you give them a pathway, if you give them a good story, if you give them the journey, a journey they can relate to that crosses the emotional thresholds and the knowledge-based thresholds, so that they combine into this sense of wisdom, and they can think, oh, I was misled. I was misled by a parasitic force of some variety. Pick your flavor. Everyone has a sense that there's a series of cabals somewhere that's conspiring to do this against us, and it's hard to know though who's correct and who's pulling at the right threads. But there is clearly something that we're all aware of that has misled so many. And we need to give a story that writes that path and gives people the ability to save face. We have a strong culture of saving face in the Western world, in the United States, even though we don't talk about it openly. If we give people the ability, like, oh, I just keep thinking they were misled. And the more Fauci reveals himself to be nothing more than just a bureaucrat who has one, he has a little bit of credentialing, and he's just an old bureaucrat who's way over his depths, but he's more of a megalomaniac and about his own ego than actually worrying about. The fact that he's supplanted, he's like, oh, this is just a health issue, not a civil rights issue. Like, it's a yes and. He's like, oh no, it can't be one or the other. It's like, no sir, it's a yes and. Like, okay, we got to deal with the health issue, but civil rights is still on the table. It never goes anywhere. And he just, that sheer repetition of it over and over again was just manipulation. And we need to let people know that they're manipulated and give them a way out.
And one of the consultants that we've been talking with quite a bit suggested that an interesting approach might be to say, you were right to have this suspicion that you had early on. So even if there surely is a large portion of the population that had a cognitive dissonance, and they chose to go in one direction. So they did have their suspicions and their concerns. There's another portion of the population that may never have had those suspicions and concerns, but at least by phrasing it in that way, it gives them the opportunity to maybe rewrite their own history and accept that they swallowed a lot of propaganda. We really want to approach it in a way that the common person doesn't feel blamed or chastised for having gone down this path, because obviously a large percentage of our country and the world did swallow that propaganda.
Yeah, and taking the high ground and conveying the message that, it's totally fine to have been misled here. There was a lot of, everybody was misled. It's not like it was something that was easy to come out against. If you're coming out against it, you're facing a lot of resistance. So, I'm really looking forward to seeing what you all put together with this. And speaking of that, so can you talk a little bit about the campaign, where people can find it, the success that it's had, and then after that, we'll talk about eventually how it'll be rolled out, how you envision that.
Sure. Well, we're on fundraiser.com. It's like Kickstarter, but it's still a little different. It's fundrazr.com, fundraiser.com/follow the science. That has been our primary fundraising push so far. Tom, we launched it alongside an initial podcast with Tom Woods, and I'm very happy to say that he actually donated $10,000 to get us started. And through nothing but we've done a dozen podcasts since then, and it's all been podcast driven, and we have now raised $95,000. Which we're just thrilled by. This thing has real legs. So we're crumbling up at the $100,000 mark, which was basically our initial sort of development idea. We're raising $300,000 through this initial campaign, which is basically the development fees and the funds for the pilot episode for to put it in the most simple terms. So we're pulling it together, and then once we're going to have this, we'll have a sort of short pilot created in episode 1, and with that, we're looking to raise an additional $1 million for the full series. So a $1.3 million price tag all in. To do something that I don't know if we talked about this at the beginning, but we're going for proper production values. We want something that could compete at the Netflix level. Even if we might have a hard time getting in through those doors, we will, part of the deal is we're going to be hiring a PR and marketing team. We've been bringing in people to help put together an amazing package that push this. So we've been doing, and it's all been through the dollars of this fundraiser campaign. People have been giving $5, people have given $100, $1,000, $5,000. It's been amazing. So anything that people can donate, we're honored and humbled to receive it. So that's fundraiser.com/follow the science. And John, do you want to jump in with, we also, let's see, we have,
so I can take that
sure,
piece.
Thanks.
We another important aspect of this is that we're attempting to crowdsource quite a bit of information. So we're looking to find stories of people whose lives have been adversely impacted by the policies that may or may not become part of the documentary. At our website, soundmindcreativegroup.com, we have a portal where people can send us their stories. And we also want to build a community of advisors on this. So our $500 donation level basically gives you access to a forum where we will be actively looking for feedback from people, looking for ideas and information. And that will kind of become our community that will help bring this thing to fruition.
And then we're building a MeWe community for anyone who donates $150, joins our MeWe community. So we're wanting to develop a proper community to discuss this, have ideas where people can come in and make themselves known to us, can give them updates on how things are going, and then would also give us a good opportunity. We have more and more different film workers from the Hollywood area and from all over the world, frankly, who have said, "We want in. I've got these skills. Let us know." We're building our Rolodex, to put it in the older parlance of Hollywood, and it's going phenomenally well. And I guess we wouldn't really talk about our credits in our past. We're, as part of our sort of anonymity, we haven't been talking about what we've all specifically worked on.
Yeah, I guess with the pseudonyms, I'm not sure how much to ask. So yeah, definitely talk about what your past, your credentials, whatever you feel comfortable talking about.
Sure. Well, I'll start off, and John's got a better rigmarole of the sort of the credit list, but I can say that we have a robust group. I mean, there's three of us who are out there speaking publicly about this with our pseudonyms. I mean, between just the three of us, we have many dozens of years of experience. We have other people who are on board. We have producers and directors, editors, composers, animation specialists, all sorts of just the whole gamut of the proper film team is assembling. And John, if you want to kind of give we have a generic list of the things we've worked on.
Yeah, so we amongst us, we have worked for most of the major studios: Disney, Warner Brothers, Discovery, A&E. And we've worked on projects like the Fast and the Furious franchise, Dateline NBC, The Today Show, Gone Girl, the film Gone Girl, Crazy Rich Asians, The Pursuit of Happiness. So, we all have worn various hats in all kinds of media in the entertainment industry.
And then within the niche market of the freedom movement and the growth of the industry in the last 15 years, which was just kind of all started with the 5 Mark D, when suddenly HD filmmaking was suddenly a thing people could do. We've been working, a lot of us have worked in that world and helped a lot of those projects and a lot of those institutions that have been building this freedom industry of filmmaking and storytelling, which is, I look at it, I can't believe how much it's grown. So we have a strong, we understand the freedom movement, we understand the liberty movement, and have worked extensively in that, as well as the professional Hollywood level. So there's a lot of experience coming to bear on this.
Well, it's incredibly exciting, and when you talk about white pill, black pill, this whole COVID thing and the response to the government being a black pill, very pessimistic about what's happening, but you see the response and what you all are doing, and all of the people kind of coalescing around this is just a gigantic white pill. Makes me very, very optimistic on the future.
Yeah, and let me just jump on that too. I find myself becoming more and more optimistic, because I feel that there are those who've been advocating for the idea, sort of the idea of freedom for a while, but it's always a difficult thing. But I feel that there's a much wider awakening occurring of individuality and a type of confidence and a type of expression, as we discussed earlier. People they're being told one thing, but their minds can sense that it's not correct and there's something going on. And that doubt and that skepticism is a new type of individual awareness that I think is something that is we're fanning the flames of that, but I think it's vast, and I think it can be tapped into, and I think we can push back against all these draconian measures that have been shoved down everyone's throats. And
in a way, that's our measure of success. Convincing people that the data doesn't reflect what actually was going on is very particular. But we will have been successful with this project if we embed in people's minds a skepticism for authority and a skepticism for people who call themselves experts. If when the next crisis comes around, if they pause for a moment and question whether what they're being told is true, we will have accomplished what we are setting out to accomplish.
100% agree with that. So I don't know if you guys can do this, but looking forward, do you have a timeline for when you'd like to have, I guess, that pilot episode out? Is that something you can kind of put out? Sure,
we give you. We're going into production in late July. We have our first array of interviews set up that we're going to be taking. We'll film those, and we'll be shooting probably into October, and start editing. And our ideal is to have at least a short form, like a 20 to 30 minute version of the pilot done by the late fall, because we feel it's at this point, we want to help drive the narrative of what's going on, because it's so active. And we feel by doing so, it makes people much more aware of us. It shows the legitimacy of our efforts. And then with that, we'll drive the rest of our fundraising on the coattails of that effort, and hopefully raise the money and get the film out in about a year's time after that. Sorry, the film, the docuseries.
Right. And do you expect, or what's the expectation around? Do you think a Netflix or an Amazon will host something like this, or find it too controversial, or do you have a contingency plan if that happens?
Sure. I mean, the idea is that we will make something that is of that quality so that to take it seriously. If we find the barriers to entry are such that we can't get to those platforms, there are many new platforms coming along that we feel that, perhaps we look for where the market's going and try and fight tooth and nail on an indie effort or whatnot. But what we plan to do and why we're looking for a proper budget is, and to be perfectly honest, $1.25 million is actually tiny in comparison to what normally would be going on at that level. But we feel that's the minimal amount to pull off what we're trying to achieve. And in doing so, we can hire the type of PR marketing impact producers who will help us fight tooth and nail to get it to where it needs to be. So that's part of the plan.
Very cool. Anything else? I've been asking my guests recently this question. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that's really important that you'd like my audience to know about this project?
Well, I think one thing that we should mention is that we've been working very closely with Nick Hudson, who is a co-founder of the organization Panda. And this organization has been doing just remarkable work at getting the word out about the data and making clear that that these policies are not only ineffective, but also a violation of basic human rights. And Nick has kind of become a mentor for us on this project. He'll certainly be in the project and probably play a major role. He's a very articulate spokesman for these ideas. So he's definitely one of the stars of this whole project.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, we talked about is this American centric. I mean, we'll be focusing on the United States as the primary arena. However, we feel that having someone like Nick Hudson, who's South African, we can get outside of the American myopic aspect of it and sort of give us that worldly kind of outsider look, because also just, I mean, I think like the way the data is reported out, I love the comparison. There was sort of the Czech Republic versus Sweden. I mean, Sweden didn't have the lockdowns and everyone hammered them for it. And then the Czech Republic had the most, they were very aggressive. They were boasting like, oh, we have all these mask mandates. Everyone's wearing masks. We're doing this whole thing. And their numbers were low initially. And then Sweden had their spike. Everyone was condemning Sweden. The Czech Republic had an enormous spike, every bit as bad as everybody else. And suddenly it was crickets. The Czech Republic went silent. All the media in Europe and the United States went silent. And it's that kind of manipulation of coverage, I think, is going to be fun to reveal, and so to speak, because I think it's its own story there, and those are the type of perspectives, that type of science communication and data communication, we think Nick will be a great voice for.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine this is going to be an exciting project for you both to work on. I'm excited to watch it when it comes out and enjoy it and share it. So thank you both, John and Alan. And maybe someday the audience can know your real names, but thank you so much for all you're doing in the fight to get the truth out there, and best of luck.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, taking a quick break here. I want to talk to you all about my friend of the show, Tyler Colford, a.k.a. Crypto Man, and his new song. And he's featured on a track with Intrinsic. It's called First World Problems. Basically, what it's doing is it's talking about different concepts are woven throughout the track, cancel culture, grifters, inflation, innovation, all kinds of different things. It's really, really interesting track. Please go wherever you listen to your music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, whichever one of these places where you listen to music, please like and follow Crypto Man, and please like this song, share with your friends, and it's just an awesome song, guys. So I got a clip for you. Check it out.
Cost of education when internet is free. Blind window makers who simply cannot see.
Hope you all enjoyed that interview on Finding Freedom. Another awesome guest. And hopefully you guys also have subscribed to the Lions of Liberty podcast, and you're getting all three of our unique shows in your little listening device delivered to your ears. If you haven't, please do that. Just go to your app, you know how to do it, and subscribe. You can also leave us a 5-star review and a nice comment. We would prefer if you did it on Apple Podcasts, but anywhere you can on the internet, please leave us a positive comment. Also, if you want to support us, we would love that too. Please go to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. You can support us for as little as a couple bucks, or if you get in at a higher level, you get merchandise and access to us, and all the way up to you can advertise on the show or get to even produce a show. So check it all out, patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. And if you haven't checked it out yet, please consider checking out the Lions of Liberty store, where we have some awesome t-shirts. We have a Taxation is Death t-shirt with an awesome design. We have a Wax On, Tax Off t-shirt. And we're always coming up with new ideas and adding new t-shirt designs to the store. Check that out at lionsofliberty.store. And if you're in the Pride, you get a discount on anything you buy in the store. So you do both of those things and you win. That's all I got, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. This is John Odermatt signing off. Always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.